underlying fundamental cause of inevitable failure, which is interest, inherent, irreversible, and therefore terminal multiplication of artificial indebtedness in proportion to a circulation or remaining capacity to service debt.
We're still here.
Wow. Wow. We survived.
Well, I published an article on that, 35 years ago, and, it was instantly in the formal internet, it was one of the most plagiarized monetary essays ever. And, likewise, it was entitled Mathematic Proof Federal Reserve Caused the First Great Depression. The so-called Federal Reserve caused.
Mike, have you had any economist out there from any branch of any disciplinary
I don't know what you're going to ask, but I can guarantee you I have.
Has anyone survived your...
Never. Never. And they the most prominent of them have plagiarized my work, and they won't, people in Steven Zarlinga's, annual monetary reform conferences, have insisted for years that you include me and pay me as a speaker because I have the only solution. And all he's ever done is morph his original plagiarism of my work into more and more so into my work as I write further essay after further essay, totally annihilating every proposition he's ever raised. When I first heard from him, he sent me an email, and he says basically says, we are of like mind, and I've just finished my book Lost Science of Money, and I was hoping that you might help me promote it. And I'm thinking, who the hell did what? 35 years after the fact that, I proved a one and one only monetary solution. But I wrote him back a polite letter. I says, well, if you understand that we're of like mind, then you understand, as it's on every page of my website, that there's a definition of mathematically perfected economy, which proves that it's the singular solution for these three categoric faults. Moreover, no prior science even existed. Name it. I've traced this obfuscation of the currency back to at least 1500 years before Christ. And I believe it's possible that one other individual in history may have authored or architected mathematically perfected economy. And the possible evidence that happened before is so scant that you have to be incredibly perceptive to see how it may have existed, in fact, in ancient Egypt, possibly at the hand of the only individual who was ever deified in the regular person who was ever deified in the entire, whatever it is, 7, 8, 9, 10,000 contiguous years of ancient Egyptian history. And that individual was Imhotep, who appears, I don't know if more recent research has traced him to, his actual, place of origin, but he's an individual who just kind of appears in ancient Egyptian history all of a sudden under the pharaoh Zoser, and is accredited as, with being, the inventor of building with stone. He engineered the, irrigation systems that, by which Egypt prospered. He constructed something like 500 astronomical observatories in his lifetime, which observatories were vital to ascertaining all of the astronomical data that's incorporated in the design and dimensions of the Great Pyramid. Imhotep. He's the founder of all the modern sciences. In fact, what we call the Pythagorean theorem was learned by Pythagoras in studying 22 years in the ancient Egyptian. They're often referred to as excuse me, the word has just escaped my mind, as if it's a religious order, but I don't believe that they existed as such a thing exactly. In any case, for violating some rule for which the penalty was death, Pythagoras actually fled Egypt after studying for 22 years, something like 1,000 years after Imhotep, in his schools, which founded all higher math, geometry. The Pythagorean theorem was indigenous to ancient Egyptian architecture and calculations and all. I mean, ancient Egypt is the earliest home that I know of it, and the probable author was Imhotep. But I believe that because of things that lacked in ancient Egypt, that it's possible that mathematically perfected economy may have existed at one prior time on Earth. Nonetheless, Stephen Zarlinga stupidly titles his book Lost Science of Money as if he's resurrected it, and of course he's plagiarized my work profusely in it. And in the end, to add to the stupidity of it all, he advocates that a Chicago plan, which he didn't author either, but was implemented, much as was just suggested, as an alternate currency subject to lower rates of interest during the Great Depression, that would save us. And of course, interest rates have fallen precipitously below that, and we, of course, persist in terminal failure. But anyway, so I wrote this letter asking Zarlinga, how he would pretend to have authored a lost science of money. How did it exist before? And why would he ask me, of all people, to help him promote his plagiarism of my work? And of course, I never heard from him again. And his evidently he I certainly welcome debating with him and anyone and everyone else at any time. But let's be serious. Mathematically perfected economy is really truly nothing even approaching the profoundness of Einstein's theories, for instance, of matter warping space, explaining gravity, of his theories of general and specific relativity. Nothing like it. We're talking second grade math. It was second grade math when I was in school, at least. And we should be ashamed of ourselves for not realizing that there is one and one only solution, and that we could do it today. People plead with me to run for president, and I actually have myself. I think that that's a lot of what's wrong with the world, that we rely on leadership. The reliance on leadership itself is an opportunity to defeat representation, and of course, government is the most plausible vehicle for exploitation. It has been through all ages. Why did Rome conquer so much neighboring territory? Because it would steal from the inhabitants of the land by exorbitant taxes, which enriched Rome as the superior warriors state. So government has existed through all history as the principal vehicle for exploitation, and we need to wake up, because it's what's happened to us today.
Well,
oh, he took a breath. Did he disappear?
no. I got to say, Mike, when you do take a breath, it's stunning.
Well, sometimes it's best to leave a conclusion.
No. I'm not. It's because the words you have been called and led and driven by this for your entire life, and there's a life force that you're expressing that is so indomitable and so unquenchable at the same time. And man, if this is as simple as you make it out to be, second grade math.
It is.
I mean, little kids in second grade can. They don't even need a calculator to figure out 2 plus 2 is 4.
I explained it to a kindergarten class once. I was born and raised in the Bay Area of California, and I lived, once I left home, I pretty quickly left to Marin County and lived in western Marin County, where people, still recall me and my avocation of mathematically perfected economy. You asked if I, spoken before economists. Well, I was actually a friend visiting a wedding and wedding reception of a good friend of mine who had asked me if he could write his father, Will McPhee, who was head of the math staff for the University of Colorado in the early 1970s. And I agreed, and then I went a few years later to Jacques and Lisa's wedding, and it's all these professors in this just fabulous huge Victorian mansion, complete with ballroom and 3 stories, I believe, and on. Anyway, I snuck in the back door in a pair of Levi's and a wool shirt, and seen all these people go in tuxedos. I had no idea where we were going, and I just had an address, and I went back to the motel after the wedding, changed into a comfortable pair of jeans, and jetted off to visit friends, and there's all these limousines parking out front. Well, anyway, so I decided to sneak in the back door of this mansion, and what happens, fortunately there's Jock and Lisa dressed just like I am. I was relieved and gave them both a hug and my blessings, and Jacques immediately says, "Mike, I'd like you to meet my father." And as soon as he said the word Mike, very, very, very distinguished gentleman, about 5 or 6 feet abreast of us in a tuxedo, immediately broke from his conversation, stretched a hand out directly toward me as he stepped toward me, grabbed my hand, drew me up to him face to face, and he says, "You're the one with these economic ideas." And I sort of bashfully said, "Well, yes, sir, I suppose so." I suddenly recalled that Jock had, asked if he could write his father about my thesis of mathematically perfected economy. And this man, wonderful man, asked me questions for literally hour upon hour upon hour upon hour until, something like 7 in the evening. He asked me, and we had maybe at times as many as 15 or 20 math professors joining our discussion with great interest. While I proved all my theories and related it to ancient and present and recent history and future history and all. And, he says suddenly when we more or less concluded, half a dozen hour discussion, which Fred knows we had the first time we spoke as well. He says, "When are you leaving?" And I said, "I have to leave first thing in the morning. My plane leaves early tomorrow." He got a frown on his face. He says, "Oh no." He says, "Can I introduce you to some people?" And I said, "Well, certainly." So he took me from room to room to room through this entire mansion for about an hour, asking everyone to meet us in the ballroom in an hour from when we began. And Will McPhee drew such respect from his peer professors that, as we entered each room, a man in a tuxedo and a young fellow in a pair of jeans and a wool shirt, the whole room fell silent, and he would announce, that he had something very important for us to do, and that he would introduce me and tell what I was going to tell him about. Anyway, an hour later, we met on the stage. It has a podium and a sound system, and I've got, 500 people audience, and most of whom are, professors at the University of Colorado, and we actually spoke to the wee hours of the morning. Will McPhee took me through the whole progress of all the questions that he asked, which were truly the most fabulous sequence of questions anyone ever asked, especially all in one sitting. And in this whole evening,